Thanks for joining our digital virtuosity session on data as a service. My name is Ted Sfikas, and I'm the Regional Vice President of Solution Consulting for Tealium. I have responsibility in North America and Latin America at Tealium, and I have given this presentation, Data as a Service, to a number of executives over the years and received some good feedback about it. And so I look forward to sharing it with you today. The premise of this presentation is based on 4 simple words: same data, different stack. What we've come to realize in our current organizations, that you're paying for a lot of applications. And anytime we're talking about anything as a service, we're talking about the financial context of it. It's not so much about the technology, which we know works. It's about the application and the method in which we deliver it to our organization. In this screen, you can see a number of different very popular technology companies that all have excellent technology in digital marketing, big data, data repository, security, you name it, privacy. All of them have their own event data, which is data that users produce in a session, their own visitor data, which is data that users have formed about them over time as their profiles and their behavior changes. And finally, their identity data. This is the data that is typically linked with privacy. It's data that you have to have consent for. In all 3 cases, every one of these technologies and literally dozens of others have their own means of acquiring this data, enriching it, and distributing it. All of digital marketing and privacy and everything else out there is going to be using this same data. So we can think of it as, when we think of data being delivered as a service conceptually, why is it that we have dozens, perhaps hundreds of different applications that we pay for doing the same thing, acquiring data the same way, requiring it that it be cleansed, requiring it that be used? Wouldn't it be better to have one single means of capturing data? Wouldn't that bring the privacy regulation and the digital marketing strategy together as privacy regulations have demanded in one fell swoop? Wouldn't it be easier to manage if we captured data first and delivered that data as a service to consuming technologies and actual people who demand it? It would, and it would positively impact digital marketing and usher in the digital transformation strategies that we see today. It would take advantage of the biggest problem in machine learning and in artificial intelligence departments, which is getting data and making sure the data is correct. And it would satisfy the legal teams that are absolutely focused on mitigating risk for their organizations, having one place for data, one place to touch it, one place to manage it, and being able to audit and track it wherever it goes. And so what are the goals? Data as a service requires 5 different things. Number 1, to collect and distribute this data in real time. Number 2, to have a scale that is enterprise class, meaning that it can accommodate dozens, perhaps hundreds of business units and technology units. Number 3, that it has been built with privacy by design mandates, complies with its role in a CCPA, GDPR, PIPEDA, and all the rest legal regulations. Number 4, that it can be integrated to all consuming applications. In other words, like the diagram you just saw previous, it's a hub and everything else is a spoke in context of getting data, nothing else. It should just be focused on providing data to consuming applications. And number 5, there has to be a high degree of automation embedded within it if we're going to take the trouble to architect such a service. The automation needs to be in place to eliminate risk, eliminate costs, and reduce labor across the board. We can do this by first thinking of data as a service as the process and people aspect. And when we think of process and people in developing disciplines in our organization, we think of another popular term called the center of excellence. In this case, it's a data center of excellence. Managing your customer data must also be an independent discipline as delivering the data in a service. And so there's going to be 3 elements that I'll quickly walk through that describe what a data center of excellence is. And the first element is the governance and architectural piece. Now, this is staffed by personnel that have a knowledge of data at a very high level and understand its broad implications. So where does data come from? An inventory of all those data sources. What is the data definition on each of these sources? Are we collecting the same data on a mobile phone as we are on an app, as we are on a website from a spreadsheet? Make that definition a schema, a living and breathing schema that you can use to build a data catalog that you can show to the rest of your organization and ask them to pick and choose which data they'd like and from what source. A data definition is otherwise known as a data layer. And so that data layer is the physical manifestation of your data schema throughout real-time devices. Third, governance and architects are going to be interested in how data gets collected, the enrichment process, how it moves across the workflow and the checks and balances. Specifications will be written that mandate how data will be actually acquired on each device, and expertise will be developed on those. Persona specifications for the actual data sets, and then all the other stuff around it that helps the company, such as who gets access to the data center of excellence, who gets access to the devices, under what conditions, who's going to manage the infrastructure as it needs updates and patches and changes to the actual network that both acquires and delivers data. When you use tag management systems, are you going to hire your own CDNs to deliver the tags, or are you going to outsource that? Of course, the KPIs and SLAs that your financial team are going to be interested in will be the metrics and the key performance indicators that governance and architectures will abide by. Security is a little bit easier to explain. This is where the security compliance laws, they're black and white. You're either going to comply with legal and regulatory, or you're not. And there's going to be an element of risk to your organization. So security typically involves personnel from your InfoSec department and people who understand security mechanisms like hashing and encryption and the resultant impact on data transmission, such as OAuth or single sign-on that you need to know about. All of the security stuff is already a service. It's already something that your data as a service environment can plug into and understand how to leverage the existing investments you've made in this area. And finally, the fun part where we have people actually build things and deliver them and start tracking consumers on websites and getting their consent and building the strength of your brand. This is where we can hire agencies or build the personnel for the Center of Excellence in-house. Solution design and delivery is all about actually creating the use cases. How are we building the visitor data set? To what degree do we need to track attributes? What are their thresholds? When does a VIP customer become a VIP customer? Under what conditions? How will we resolve identity across the average of 6 or 7 devices that most consumers use today? What about an identity graph being used inside a customer data platform? What about thousands of integrations potentially that you have to worry about? This is the stuff that engineers come in and help you build, or you purchase outside of the company and bring it in-house or use as a service as part of your center of excellence. And so all of these things together, the 3 of them, comprise your data center of excellence in some shape, manner, or form. You'll have different expertise focuses, and it typically is led by a chief data officer or somebody thereof assigned to the management, integrity, and care of this data in your company. So becoming as a service, now that we know what a center of excellence look like, keep in mind that, again, we've already got the people in the process. Now it's about actually building a service, a new product that other business units and technology units in your organization can interact with. And so whether that's a digital marketing team, which tends to be the most popular users of data per se, but not the only ones, the CRM produces its own demographic data and customer state data that is extremely valuable. It should be a contributor and a consumer of data as a service. Your customer service, protecting your brand, handling calls. the developers and engineers building and innovating new products and services that your data sources might offer. The data warehouse, which is linked intrinsically to your business intelligence departments. They're almost one and the same. The BI reports and dashboards that you build are only as good as the data you're feeding it. And the same can be said for machine learning, data scientists and engineers. All of these constituents inside an enterprise will be consumers of as a service. And the key thing to remember, the reason that big green circle's in the middle, is they all have to be using the same data at the same time. It's not only integrity, it's timing. Without real time involved in a data as a service environment, all you have is a database. It needs to flow freely across the enterprise, incorporate privacy, and deliver on demand when people need it for their applications. This is what it'll look like ultimately. We're skipping right to the end with this diagram. You see a purple circle, a green circle, and a pink circle. And starting from left to right, that pink circle incorporates a chargeback mechanism from a data source perspective. This is how your chief financial officer can get his or her question answered. What am I getting when I buy data as a service? Why should I buy it? How does it save us money? How does it help my company grow? Or how does it return investment? Period. That's the only reason you buy software. And these circles explain how data as a service will be reacting to those kinds of KPIs, SLAs, and OLAs. The pink circle basically audits every single session on every single device. So data as a service needs to basically write everything down. The minute people start interacting and producing data, it's being stored and audited for compliance as well as financial measurement. When we move to the center after the data is normalized and enriched, typically today you might do it with a data lake. And that's that big drop of water that you see in the middle circle there, or near the middle circle. We're going to get rid of that and all the labor associated with it. You can still use data lakes, but this will run in parallel with your data lake and your warehouse. Now we're simply diverting the customer data into a customer data platform where profiles are formed. And once again, we can charge back to the enterprise on who is using that profile. Perhaps only 3 or 4 segments of your marketing environment need to use Sally Jones' profile. They should only pay for that profile and not the entire software. So we can balance costs in data as a service just like we can with software as a service or infrastructure as a service. And that's what the purple circle indicates in this governance routine, is that once your organizations start using this data, they're going to be charged back based on their usage, just like you do with any popular SaaS product. Why can't it be so as with data? And so let's check the boxes on what we need to do to make this happen. There's 4 capabilities that strategically your company will be focused on when delivering data as a service. We'll go over each of them quickly and get to the final display of ROI. The first is data governance. This topic, obviously, we've already explored it in the data center of excellence, but we explored it from a design perspective. From a data as a service perspective, we're going to have to independently manage our governance. That means we can make decision on how we secure data, how we fulfill a privacy regulation like opt-out for CCPA, how we acquire data from a mobile app using an SDK, all without disrupting the application stack. When your data center of excellence tweaks your data as a service governance strategy, nobody needs to know. Data is still being collected and transmitted as expected, and that's the true scalability of data governance in this model. And so you can see the same diagram that we just went over, except the pink and green and purple circles now show how we comply with it in executing, not just telling the CFO about the chargeback model and what we've done to bill everybody. How do we actually deliver? Well, your data as a service technology acts as a data supply chain. And so the moment that data sources that you see on the left start producing data, we're going to have functionality that automatically captures consent based on the legal basis of your country, whether it's the United States or the European Union or so forth. And so that consent becomes part of the data set. When we move to the center where the customer data platform is reconciling identity and reconciling all of the sources and unifying customer profiles into a single view, we change from acquiring consent to the functionality of managing it. Imagine doing this with 120 different technologies facing the customer. You'd have to rebuild over and over again, redeploy, redesign, hire the same people, duplicate your labor, duplicate the risk, and it doesn't make sense. A customer data platform scales that down to 1x instead of 120x. This is where we manage consent. What does that mean? It means when Sally Jones has told you that she's okay with Facebook and Google, but nothing else, it's your job at this point in the data supply chain to make sure that happens. Any piece of her data that moves outside to the right of this circle needs to be audited, needs to be controlled, and needs to be transmitted on a need-to-know basis. That kind of sophisticated integration and activation engineering will require a large amount of investment to the tune of 2 or 3 full-time personnel, probably for each of the departments in question. And so you can do your own math for bringing hard dollars to that, because everybody will be different. But enforcing consent, that purple circle at the end, is about integration. Where does data go and why? That decision orchestration logic is built into data as a service. The service itself automates this decision for you on your behalf. You simply give the data center of excellence your requirements, and they implement it once in this data supply chain to meet the data governance need. The second box is data standardization. And in this area, it's an important tactic to call out. It's very closely related to data governance. Whereas governance is about designing the data supply chain, standardizing data is the people in your organization and the personnel. It's their take on that design and how they want to use data as a service. In order for an entire enterprise to use the same data set, they've all got to be talking the same language. And so standardization, first and foremost, requires a common nomenclature across the enterprise, across applications. If there is no way to use the same name for an atomic piece of data, that is, some application forces you to call first name as F name, that's fine. Data as a service must have the ability to translate that and conform to the standard prior to transmission. That's what standardization is. It's not only a data dictionary per se, it's a data enforcer. And so standardization techniques are very difficult to engineer on your own. We want to do that by purchasing data as a service. And ultimately, this is the model that you'll end up with. To the left, you have 3 really popular examples of how we would standardize the detection of data on standard devices and collect it. Very simple. If I'm using an iPhone, what's the interface? How do I collect the data? Fantastic. If I'm using a browser on a website, same data really, but totally different on a Chrome browser as opposed to an iPhone browser. But at the end of the day, a button click's a button click. A first name's a first name, a zip code's a zip code. And before it gets into that big orange circle in the middle, we're going to transform that data and process it to make sure it complies with our universal nomenclature. So it's important to standardize data collection on the left, and also standardize the way the enterprise requests this data. So it's great that you have a bunch of tags and APIs and files and really smart engineers that are running warehouses and lakes and can use Java and Python. But if you open the floodgates and let them access data as a service freely with no enforcement or security, you're going to run into a large amount of trouble. You need to control the way people request data to make it easier for them, not to make their life more difficult. Show me a visual catalog of everything I'm collecting. Let me point and click what data I need to complete my job and walk away. Data is now a commodity in data as a service, and it can't become a commodity until we standardize how we collect it, and how we distribute it in a service request model. The third box to check is data automation. And this is a fundamental capability of data as a service. Data automation is also obviously independently managed. In other words, when a neat new technique and technology comes out to automate the acquisition of data from an iPhone as it expands its iOS or an Android system, new identity capabilities are going to be coming up on the horizon with the introduction of intelligent tracking prevention and same site. The world's going to change how brands represent the concept of acquiring customer data. And there cannot be a manual process to do this. You can't pick up the phone and ask everybody if it's okay. You can't get their data and then not respond to it when they say erase it, or let me see it, or let me modify it. There has to be a heavy, heavy degree of data automation in a technology that you are relying upon to be the backbone of your data workflow. And so data automation is not a nice to have. It's a must-have in the world of data as a service. You must automate the request and usage processes to mitigate the risk and scale to the needs of your enterprise. Everybody's going to want 1,000 different things, and you need to automate your way out of that easily, effectively, and predictively on time. This is what it'll look like, your data supply chain from an automation perspective. You can see on the left, we have the word collect, and then on the right, we have the word activate. That's the beginning and the end of your customer data set. Your data as a service technology needs to be in the device at the moment in real time, detecting, collecting, and that'll be anonymous, as you can see at first. It'll then move to phase 2, where that identity data, although it's still unknown, at least it's standardized. You've captured who's coming on your site. You may not know who they are. They may end the session right there and we start all over again, or they may authenticate. And that's where they become known in the middle. That's where you say, it's time to form a profile. I've got Sally Jones's ID, I've got her email, I've got her consent. She's been on the site a couple times already. She's already purchased something. She's a high value prospect. And we're gonna start to show her personalized ads that meet her needs as expressed. That's a known customer. And you might have noticed as I'm explaining anonymous to known, if you're a marketer, your mind's thinking 17, 18 different digital marketing strategies. That's the point. Data changes in each of these places, and your marketing strategy should be able to point and click its way through data as a service and say, I need different data. Tell me who's a frequent visitor. Tell me who clicks on this product the most. Very simple things like that without having to set up a project for 7 days and meet over coffee and have 10 different meetings. It should just be automatic. And by the time you get here with data as a service, it is automatic. The rest, where the identity becomes a lead for future nurturing digital marketing, and where the ultimate become a customer that your brand wants to protect, is all about integration and activating the right function, the right campaign, the right technology at precisely the right moment in time. Not before, not after. Not showing them a product on a display ad that they've already bought. Not immediately haranguing them on their Facebook wall with images of your product after they had just seen it 2 seconds ago. This is where we take care of our customers, where they're not just known, but they're leads, and we're more careful with them. They're our MVPs. A data as a service backbone distinguishes the customer data set for every business unit in your organization at precisely the same time. When your social marketing team is ready to market, they will, and the email team will know about it because they all use the same data. The last one involves the data integration that we just spoke about. This is the fun part. This is all the logos and the acronyms and the colors that we see in the industry today, and the Lumascape of 7,000 different digital marketing vendors and BI tools and all the like. You have to integrate to all of it. Here's the good news. It's not that hard if you're only doing it on a one-to-many basis rather than point-to-point for every single business unit. Here's where you really see the investment in your data as a service pay off, because when you do acquisition strategies, you're going to be looking to SEM and DMP technologies to feed off a customer data set. You will then leverage what you learned in acquisition when you go to engagement, when you start using voice of customer and multivariate testing to further nurture that funnel you're building in a drip campaign, or using RFM tactics. And again, that customer at the center, that 360 degree of the customer view, is not just sales speak, it's a tangible investment you've made and is constantly bilaterally moving across these different strategies, feeding the enterprise as it moves into nurture. Now it's time to really make some money and make people happy with your brand. Market to them in real time when they need to see it, under conditions that your seasoned marketers have determined to be good for your business. That's the difference between blasting a display ad for 100 grand over 2 months, as opposed to spending incrementally, piece by piece, nurturing the same cohort of people across the life cycle of the products that you want to sell them. And finally, ending up an analysis. Don't forget the CFO. He or she wants this measured every step of the way. How has this data backbone improved marketing? Where is the customer data set becoming enriched? Did we comply with privacy? Can we supply our CMP with data subject access requests? Have we avoided a lawsuit? All of this is happening in this phase, and it's feeding off, you guessed it, the exact same data set that we used in the other three. And so the outcome is very simple. The value of data as a service is that it is centralized. Architecturally speaking, you've minimized, or should I say optimized, the people, the process, and the technology by scales. We are no longer doing this on a point-to-point basis. Your internal rate of return is calculated per technology. There's an impact on all of them. Don't leave money on the table when you develop data as a service. Just because you have to buy tag management systems and CDPs, yes, that's expensive. You have to pay for the best. But it will have ROI on every single technology that uses customer data. And so calculate what that is. We think it's 120 on the average. You will also find value in your security efforts. This is very hard to do. It's very in-depth with a lot of professionals. Please just do it once. A customer data hub that is unifying sources to destinations in a data supply chain with a hub in the middle, reconciling customer profiles. There's your chance to use a customer data hub as a staging environment to comply with CCPA and GDPR once and one time only. It's your single source of truth where you can pull out DSARs for your privacy regulation needs. So security will be very positively impact. Your InfoSec team is only going to have to look at one place to answer the question, where does the customer live? And the last one is the compliance. I don't have to sell anybody on this. The penalties are extremely high. CCPA is coming into effect on July 1st of 2020. GDPR came into effect almost 2 years ago, or over 2 years ago, and Canada's PIPEDA Act has been around for a while. They all basically say the same thing. Make sure you have a legal basis for consenting, for getting consent from consumers. Make sure that you enforce what they say and prove it. Make sure you have an auditable system. And so what they're really saying is, we need you to comply when we say so, and there's a time limit you can't take all year. For CCPA, you've got about 45 days to respond to a lot of these DSARs. That sounds like a lot of time. Not if you don't have data as a service. If you're going point to point, you're gonna need all 45 days. So those are the three outcomes: centralized, secure, and compliant. The whole time, as data as a service has revolutionized the way you look at data, managing it independently, and ultimately, shouldn't be an afterthought of your digital transformation. It should be a prerequisite. You should understand what you're dealing with first before you manage the implications of what you're dealing with. So in order to lead digital transformation, think about forming a data center of excellence and leading digital transformation.